Hello, my name is Erica Hobbs and I chose to analyze the Voice of America's portrayal of Syrian refugees. I selected featured articles and editorials to compare. I chose an inclusion range of the month of November because of the turmoil that the world witnessed surrounding the refugee crisis in Europe throughout the month. Health issues of Syrian refugees were ever present, though more as an undercurrent within the news outlet. Refugees' health and well-being was the blatant focus in but one of the 8 featured articles that I examined and in none of the editorials. Both physical and psychological aspects of Syrians' health were incorporated within the pieces. For example, in one story, a refugee family with a physically disabled child is shown alongside video footage of bombs dropping and the city that they fled almost reduced to rubble, with the father recounting the fear that they constantly lived in. I found it interesting that the stories went from being told widely from an outsider's or reporter's perspective at the beginning of November to being told increasingly from a Syrian's or advocate's perspective. This contrast can be seen in the November 6 article Rainy Season Accentuates Lebanon Trash Crisis, wherein not a single word from a refugee or advocate is relayed, in comparison to the November 28 article in New York, A Warmer Reception for Syrian Refugees, wherein over a third of the piece was from the perspective of refugee advocates. Refugees are definitely discussed with increasing familiarity with the progression of the month. This was reflected in the shift in perspective of the pieces, where earlier stories simply refer to Syrian refugees or migrants, whereas later stories relay specific experiences of Radwan, Mariam, Fahed, Hashem, and Khalil. In the same vein of increasing familiarity and humanization of refugees, more and more direct quotes from Syrians relaying their harrowing experiences, alongside photos and video footage representing their arduous journey, adverse camp conditions, and the war-torn home that they fled, are incorporated into both editorials and featured articles. This certainly engenders compassion in the reader, so I'd say they are used favorably. Similar to the incorporation of photos and quotes of Syrian refugees, the vast majority of words used to describe their characteristics, actions, and so forth present the refugees as innocent victims, or those in need of saving and deserving of help. These words have a positive connotation or implication in how they are used. They facilitate compassion towards Syrians. The tone these pieces take somewhat parallels the temporal increase in familiarity. Later stories take on a more involved or impassioned demeanor towards the Syrians, provoking empathy in the reader and swaying him or her in favor of the refugees, while widely ignoring potential problems that host countries may face in light of their arrival. Unfortunately, this reflects somewhat poorly on the objectivity of the news service. Other pervasive themes of both articles and editorials include the health toll that refugees face, general opinions on refugees, the state of refugee living conditions, as well as discussion of what the rest of the world should do, both to address refugees' needs and the situation in Syria that drove them out in the first place. Relating back to health, psychological tolls weigh heavily on Syrian refugees, whether they are in camps transition or settled in their host nation. The xenophobia that they face, especially when they are lumped in with the terrorists that they're fleeing, detrimentally impacts refugees' mental well-being. Additionally, this group is at increased risk for an abundance of mental health problems. The poor living conditions that they are provided, with no means to improve them, is detrimental both psychologically and physically. The long and dangerous migration that they have faced and may still face, as well as tactics of war that Assad's forces used in Syria, likely have lasting effects on Syrian refugees' physical health as well. In light of all this, and in summation, I believe that we should steer public health practice towards providing refugees with abundant mental health services and support at all stages of their journey. Provision of treatment for lasting physical health effects should also be prioritized. The Voice of America's portrayal of Syrian refugees certainly engenders empathy towards them, which may help to facilitate these goals. Here are my articles and editorials that I used for this analysis, and thank you for your time and attention.